Before we get started on the Life is Strange review, I just want to quickly go through the spoiler system that I'm going to be trying to use in this. So it is a 3-tiered system reflecting the 3 main parts of this video. Firstly, we have level green, if you want to call it that. No spoilers. This is where I'm just going to do my review for people who want to know what Life is Strange is about. Spoilers only on the level of the first half an hour or so, just so I can explain what the game is about, and then it's, just going to be kind of general stuff. The next one is level 2, which is level yellow, which is I'm going to go through it episodically. Once again, it's going to be general, but I know that there might be some people who don't want to know, when the twists are coming and when the plot is good and when it's bad. They might just want to see it for themselves. So, in order to cater for that, I'm, going to keep it yellow. And the final one, which is red, which is complete spoilers, talking about the ending, talking about major events throughout the entire plot. So if you haven't played it and you want to, or you haven't watched all the things on YouTube, or if just in any way you haven't seen the full thing and you want to see the full thing, just skip it. So this will be applying both to the background video that I'm going to be using, which is going to be taken from my Let's Play of Life is Strange. I'll leave a link in the description to that if you want to watch that. And it will also apply, obviously, to what I'm talking about. So, yes, I'll leave timestamps also in the description, so if you want to just skip to the review or skip to the discussion, you can do that. Before we get into the actual review, I'm going to talk quickly about my favorite things from this month. There are only 3 of them. My favorite podcast from this month has been Lore. It's kind of scary stories, origins of where did the whole werewolves thing kind of come from, various things on that topic. My favorite live action TV series, Scream Queen's been reviewing that, as well as American Horror Story, so if you want to check that out, go to my main channel. My favorite non-fiction book is a book by Alain de Botton, and his book Constellations of Philosophy. I love it. It's basically like the philosophy equivalent of a self-help book. It's very much like, if you're stressed, here's philosophy that relates to this guy talking about stress kind of thing. So it's, it's very nice. I really like it. I definitely suggest you read it. Anyway, hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sam Harkin and welcome to a reviews day of Life is Strange. So, yeah, first level green. Just going to talk about the game itself. So the general overview is that you're playing as Max Caulfield, who is just, a regular photography student. She's in class. She's kind of your standard protagonist. She's shy. She's talented. Shit from the popular girls kind of stuff. She goes into the bathroom and she witnesses a murder, at which point she sticks out her, was it left or right? Her right hand. And she finds that she can rewind time, and things go crazy from there. So, the plot is, it's actually pretty good. It's really dramatic at points, which I love. But the thing is, at the same time, there are definitely some missteps at times, which I mean, the thing that's so interesting about reviewing this is that there's chunks of parts of various elements of the game that I don't like, and I probably shouldn't overlook them, but I still just really enjoy the game. So, the plot, I feel kind of stumbled a bit, especially with the last episode, and with... I'm not going to get into specifics, because I said I wasn't going to get into specifics. Characters, I really like that they're fairly fleshed out. I mean, maybe some of them are a bit oh, she's the Christian one, as opposed to a giant backstory. But then again, for the number of people that they have, I think they did pretty well. The visuals I really liked. It's, it's like 3D models and everything, but it's not, trying to be photorealistic. It's more stylized. It's very nice stylization when you're doing time traveling, and also having like sketches all over the place. The music is just fantastic. Every single time I've heard a licensed song, which admittedly hasn't been much because I've had to take them off for filming, which sucks because then it would just be like an ending and it would just be quiet the entire time. And I'm just like, oh, I can't wait until I can watch a Let's Play that has the music of this. But yeah, it's just phenomenal. Everything that has been on there pretty much is either on my iTunes or is going to be on my iTunes. And the last recommendation thing that I would say is that you need to probably give it 2 episodes. The first episode is alright, but yeah, the second episode, you really need that one to actually sell you on the story. And yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think you guys should get it. But now we're going to move on to the episodic part. So, episode 1. Tons of people didn't like Chloe's dialogue. I was able to kind of get past it a bit, and that's part of the reason people didn't like the first episode. So, if that does annoy you, it gets better, like the YouTube thing. No, the dialogue gets better in that respect. I was unsure about how the time travel implication of, you can make a choice and then you can be like, no, I don't like that, and go back. But I think overall, for the jobs that a first episode always has of introducing the world, introducing the gameplay, introducing the story, it does all right. The story, I would argue, though, doesn't get really interesting until the very end, when it's introducing what's going to be like the overarching narrative. But, which, I mean, good, but it would be nice if it was more exciting in the actual game. Now, episode 2, it gets much more exciting, more interesting stuff. The ending was, it was so involved. Like, it was something that I was talking to people about for ages, including people that don't play video games, which were like, why are you telling me this? Why is this in a video game, kind of stuff. And the ending also kind of helps rein in some of the issues I had with the whole time travel versus choice issue. The one thing that did completely mess me up, though, in this part is that I have a fetch quest in the middle. And it was bad not only because it took me ages to find the last thing, but I kept looking around at everything, and it became very obvious that the internal monologue made no sense. Like, there was one point where it was like, there's a discarded washing machine, and she said something like, think about how many jeans that's washed or something, and I was like, what the fuck is the point of that? So yeah, that did bug me a lot. Third episode went down with more of the investigation, but the ending, I liked that they went for a cliffhanger for the ending, but as I'm going to talk about for episode 4, it ended up being just a really stupid storyline. Episode 4, it ended up being a stupid storyline. They really just kind of wrote themselves into a corner, and then they had to just kind of, do a U-turn. And I mean, I'm kind of like, yes, they did a U-turn, but also this is a fictional work, and they could have just not written themselves into that corner. So, you don't really have an excuse like that. And I mean, it does make sense later on, I guess, when you kind of look at the entire series as a whole. But I mean, it just bugged me. We get into the actual mystery solving, which is good, even though it does highlight how basically what feels like 80% of the entire mystery is just in this one episode. And the twist at the end was really good. Episode 5 was... It's an interesting thing to examine, especially since I've only beaten it a week or so ago. Because it felt like episode 4 solved basically all the mysteries, but now we still have to find something to do for episode 5. So there wasn't really much delving into the mystery. There was lots of, kind of surreal stuff, which I love the imagery of, and I loved getting to play that. But ultimately, when you look back on it, it's like there was basically no story in that. And the ending, which is going to be the topic of discussion for today, it was interesting. I'm ambivalent a bit about it, but I'm leaning on the side of liking it. Speaking of which, we are now in the final section, ladies and gentlemen, so feel free to click off now if you don't want any spoilers, because we're going to do the ending. Let's do this. So, I feel like this is going to be a lot more freeform. Like, I've made a whole bunch of notes, but it's going to be a lot more kind of discussing stuff. Because of the discussion. I think... Okay, so... Obviously, if you're listening to this part, you've either played the whole game and you know about the final choice, or if you don't and it's just, you're just bumbling around here because you're interested in what the story is, maybe you might want to play it depending on what the story is. The final choice is, it's essentially shown that there's this giant storm coming, and the reason that it's coming is because you, Max Caulfield, saved your friend Chloe Price from being killed in the bathroom at the start of the game. So it's, kind of a chaos theory, kind of like, oh, it's all because this. So the ending, you have the photo, and that's actually part of the reason I was kind of like, oh, I kind of understand why they did the 3 and 4 thing, is because they're establishing that you can time travel through photos. Thought it was not the best way of doing it, but it's more functional than it is like, oh yes, story. But the idea was, yeah, you can go back in time and you can sacrifice Chloe by just kind of going back in time and not preventing her murder, or you can just be like, screw it, I love you, Chloe, whatever, and you can just sacrifice Arcadia Bay. And it was... So the thing is, it did stir up a lot of controversy because everybody kind of felt that their choices were invalidated. For example, one of the things that happened in mine is I didn't end up saving Kate. But if you sacrifice Chloe, what ends up happening is you go back, you sacrifice Chloe and stuff, and you go, well, I know that Mr. Jefferson is hiding all these bodies in, like, the dark room kind of stuff, and the police invade, and then, people aren't drugged, and that means Kate didn't get drugged, and now she's not going to commit suicide. So people are like, well, that invalidates it, doesn't it? Because the choices that I made led to her dying, but now she's not dying because of this final choice that I made that invalidated the other choices. And similarly, if you had Kate live, but you choose to sacrifice Arcadia Bay, even though it's very vague, there's a possibility that Kate died, and then like, oh, you invalidated the choices by which she lived. How could you, kind of stuff. And I'm not going to deny, in the moment, it is a stupid way of doing things. But as I've kind of looked back on it, it is kind of a question of what is involved in the choice. Because I think everybody, when they play a choice-based game, their focus of the choices is, okay, what's going to be the consequence of this? And you do get those consequences, it's just you don't get those consequences that last the entirety of the game. So if you kill off Kate accidentally, like I did, she remains dead, episode 3, episode 4, and a good chunk of episode 5. But she doesn't end up necessarily being dead at the end. And the question that I guess I have is, does that necessarily mean it invalidates the choice? Because, you still have to live with kind of the guilt, I guess. I'm trying to structure this, so we will talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to talk about the final choice because it is the kind of... I like it very much reflects, in my opinion, the final choice grief, I guess, because I feel that sacrificing Chloe is quote unquote the better ending, because like it gives you a complete kind of ending. There's a complete kind of feeling that the entire circle is like completed now. Everything has happened. The loop is finished. Blah 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 blah. And I feel like this is kind of metaphorical for you just kind of accepting her death. Whereas if you choose to sacrifice your town, the ending, I mean, it's still kind of good because, you get to leave the town with Chloe, and one could argue that, you're almost kind of freeing her from this town, but it's also more ambiguous. Like, you don't know if Chloe is angry at you because, you killed her family. You don't know who died, so maybe Kate doesn't end up dying or something. Yeah, and maybe this could continue to happen because you potentially still have your time travel abilities. And so, and I don't think it is as simple as, killing Chloe is right and killing the town is wrong, because I think, there are more moral kind of things involved in this, because if you choose to just let the tornado kill everyone, you're kind of essentially being passive. Whereas if you decide to kill Chloe, even though obviously you're killing her by going back in time and not trying to stop her murder, it's still kind of active because you have to make that decision to use your time manipulating abilities to go back in time to then be in that situation where you can not stop her death. Not to mention that the consequence of the tornado is so vague because we don't know who dies. We just kind of get a thing of you driving through the town and like, ooh, it's very quiet. But now we are into the final stages of this, the in-depth kind of discussion of which I have appropriately labeled existentialist bullshit. So, going back to the whole there's no choice thing, I think that guilt in and of itself is kind of a consequence. Because, like, I guess part of the reason that I find it so weird is that people aren't going, oh, but there's choice involved, is that, like, for example, if you choose to sacrifice Chloe, the quote-unquote real-world scenario is literally just the start of the game, but then instead of, going back in time and pressing the fire alarm kind of thing, it's literally just, you see a girl get murdered, and then you leave the bathroom and say, hey, there was a girl that got murdered. But the thing is that, the second time around, when we have to do it at the end of the game, it's a lot more, guilt involved because of our perspective, of our knowledge that we are actively going to participate in Chloe's death. Whereas, the real world kind of thing, whatever that ends up being, it is no different. Like, I know that sounds really weird. Hopefully it makes sense. And I think in many ways it is kind of an indication that the real world consequences is not the only factor involved in, this morality. It's involved with who's involved and what's their previous experience and what are their actions. Because, we've actually had 5 days with this dead girl that nobody else has had because of this whole time manipulation thing. And maybe fate is what is making the consequences good or bad, but that doesn't necessarily determine how moral you are as a person. As I said, this was existential bullshit. The other part... So I feel that this game is basically just about grief. We're choosing at the very end whether we want to accept or be in denial about whether or not our friend should be dead kind of thing. And what I find even more interesting is the whole idea of if only I had enough time, because this sentiment is echoed in various ways throughout the entire game. There's kind of like the principles like, oh, I would totally have been able to save her if only I knew, that kind of stuff. Like, if only I had these time manipulation powers. And the result that we kind of have of this situation in which we have more time with Chloe, instead of just this stranger who gets shot in the bathroom, it's our best friend who gets shot in the bathroom, is it actually makes it a lot worse and it makes it a lot harder because it's harder knowing that will happen. The whole idea, like, it's not nice to obviously have a sudden death, but you know, the idea that we have to be like, oh my god, she's going to die after she says, get the gun away from me, psycho, and he shoots her. Like, it's that much harder. And maybe what we don't necessarily want is more time, but we want to make things what we consider to be right. And that's kind of Max's issue, is that she just wants to make things right in a situation that she can't. And maybe instead of wanting to be able to rewind and have more time, we need to just use our time better. And you know, there's grief from all over. Like, everybody feels guilty about Kate if she ends up dying, whether that be Max, whether that be Victoria, whether that be, you know, like, I think at one point Chloe feels guilty about it. And we also have the whole thing with euthanasia. Like, we're kind of in this situation where choices are getting shut down, and I think that's kind of the final point I want to make, that we do have a loss of choice, because we all as people have plans for what we want to do and what others want to do, and we never feel that we have enough time, and you know, death looms and blah 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 blah. And quite a lot of the character deaths that we see in this game are kind of marked by Max's choices in one way or another, whether that be, you know, we choose to euthanize, we don't help out Kate, kind of stuff. And the thing, I guess, that is so interesting about death is that it is us defining ourselves by our plans and by our choices, and time always kind of, I guess, undoes that. And yeah, that was the very long point that I wanted to make, that yeah, like, we do want to escape death so that we can do more of what we're doing and do more for the world. But we can, like, we need death to define, like, our experiences. But yeah, it's just so interesting to be able to examine games through this philosophical mindset, because yeah, death does come for us all, and you know, breaks down the plans and choices that we use to define ourselves. So go hug somebody you love, kind of stuff. I feel like slightly giddy, but also kind of like heavy, just talking about all that stuff, which is, I mean, is good. You need to face death. You need to understand that is a thing, and live your life accordingly. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys really like Life is Strange. Might watch the Let's Play. That'd be nice. And yeah, it was a fantastic game. Thank you to like Don't Nod and Square Enix and everybody involved, because it was an amazing game. And thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Not next week. Third Tuesday for this show. Okay, bye.